Hello everyone, my name is Paul Mikowski. I teach digital art and animation at Budding Genius Academy in Mississauga. I've been an animator for 6 years, working on 2 television productions, and I've been a visual artist for about 12 years before that. Well, at the same time. Digital drawing and animation are excellent ways to develop a child's creativity and abstract thinking, which are fundamental to succeed in STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math. So what would your child learn in my class? So with this course, we will be focusing on the fundamentals of animation, how to create a character, rig a character in the software, and some background and perspective work. It would run for about 15 weeks, that's what we're thinking at the moment, but it would depend, on the child, on the time we have, how quickly they move, and over time we may evolve the course. But those are the basics of what we will begin with. This is rigged focus animation. We'll be creating various layers of whatever object we want to animate, whatever imagination wants us to do. We will rig them, connect them in ways which are logical, and we will animate them piece by piece. I think most people kind of combine art and animation together. Well, in today's world, I don't think that's as necessary anymore. You don't have to be a spectacular artist to be an animator, right? These jobs are kind of separated between like design and animation. Still, we can go over some art and drawing techniques and some tips with your child, but we will mostly be focused on allowing them to animate an object or a character or something and make it look good, right? Or at least as good as they can, at their age. They don't have to be Disney animators at this stage, but we can give them a good fundamental base to begin with, so that from here they can move forward in their career, or something, move forward in the future, or just create something that they like. I don't know. And if we have time, I would love to go over some audio and video editing with the child, right? If we have time, we can export the frames of our animation separately. We can import it into a video editing program. There's a bunch of free ones we can use, and we can learn how to edit from there. Maybe add some audio, create some sound effects or music or something. That would be fun, but that depends on each student, on the time. That's not currently in the course outline, but maybe it will be. If we have the chance, we'll do it anyway. Who knows? It could be fun. So, what are we looking at? What's on my screen here? This is Toon Boom Harmony. This is industry standard animation software. You'll find this any show that you see on television. Most of them will be using this. There's also Adobe Animate, also known as Flash, and Moho, but those aren't as popular anymore. This is the big one. It is important to note that if you will be applying your student to this course, you will have to pay for the monthly standard package, the express package of this, the cheapest package, which I think is about $40. It's monthly, so keep in mind that is a cost, an added cost to this, but you will be able to use it any time, right? So this is Toon Boom Harmony. It's various tools here, right? You got a brush tool, you can draw. It's various different brush strokes, types of brushes, you can use whatever. There's some more fancy like the ones here. There's more kind of standard like this. Softer brushes such as this. You can choose between any. I'm not sure. This is the biggest package I have here. I don't know if they're all available in the cheapest one, but it's not too important. We can just use standard lines for anything. There's a pencil tool, similar. We won't go over the differences, but there is an important difference in animation. We'll mostly be using the pencil tool. Eraser tool. What do you think the eraser tool does? It erases. Text tool, we won't be using this, but just to show off. And shape tool, we will be using the shape tool. This is important. You can create different types of shapes very quickly, right? Yeah, stuff like that. There's also the paint bucket tool we will also be using. You can just paint in whatever with a certain color of your choice. Pretty fancy, pretty basic stuff, not too fancy. And then there's also this transform tool, which we can use to grab an entire drawing and move it around, or skew it, scale it, rotate it, stuff like that. Very basic stuff at the start. Get rid of all that stuff for now. Okay, so now down here, this is called the timeline. This is very important for any animation software. The timeline has all the frames of our animation. Currently it's playing at 24 frames per second, so every 24 frames is 1 second, and we use that information that we have to kind of map out the speed of our animation, although we always need to adjust that while we're making it. The timeline essentially has a list also of all our drawings, our drawing layers. For characters, we'll be separating arms, forearms, hands, body, head, the different parts of the head, or things on the head, the nose, the lips, the eyes, etc. It has their exposure, which is how long those certain body parts will be visible, or on what frames they will be visible in the animation. It also has the subdrawings of each drawing layer. So you could have a mouth that goes ah, then you could also have another drawing on top of that same drawing, or within that same drawing, have like E or oo, right? We can switch between them anytime. And this timeline will also have pegs. Now, pegs are the objects that we attach to our drawings to move them, because we want to store all our motion data within those pegs and on the drawings themselves. The drawings we just want to keep as drawings. We don't want to modify those themselves. We want to modify them through the pegs, which we'll use to skew, scale, rotate, etc. and so forth. So I can go on and on forever about all this technical jargon, but Paul, when are we going to start animating? All right, we're going to start animating right now. I'm going to show you. We're going to do a quick demonstration. I'm going to create a ball, and I'm going to have the ball moving from left to right on the screen, and it's going to kind of loop downwards. It's not just going to go in a straight line. And I'll show you right now. We're going to do that right now. Okay, let's do it. So I'm going to grab my elliptical shape tool here on the left side of the screen on the toolbar. I'm going to create a quick ball here. Red ball with a black outline, absolutely perfect. And so we switch to our free transform tool here, or just transform tool. And this is the tool we use to animate. Every time we move something in the software like this, it'll create with transform tool. It'll create a keyframe, as you can see on the timeline down here. When we created the ball, it created this kind of grayish square, or sorry, rectangle shape, and that's exposure drawing exposure. And it also and when we moved it, it created this red square within that rectangle, and that's called a keyframe. That's called a keyframe, and we should go over keyframes actually real quick. So a keyframe stores the motion data of an object or layer within Toon Boom Harmony at a certain point or at a certain frame within the program. Motion data being the scale, the rotation, right, the position, all these other things. It'll store where you moved or skewed or rotated or anything that specific layer at that frame at that moment. So in this case, right, I moved it here. It's going to save it that position, but now if I remove the keyframe by pressing F7, it'll go back to where I initially drew it, because now, as you can see down here, there's no red square. The keyframe data is lost. It's not there. I deleted it, so it'll just go to its original position. Sorry, original position. Again, though, Paul, this is just too much technical jargon. Just animate already. Okay, I'll do it. We only have exposure for one frame here at the bottom. We're gonna go all the way to the end of our timeline here. It's 60 frames. Press 5. Now the thing is exposed to the entire length of our current video. So now it won't disappear when I click off the frame to something else, right? Now, so I can have it here. I can press F6 to insert keyframe. Now I can go to frame 60. Let's go to frame 60. I'm gonna move it here, and I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna scale it a bit. Now, see this line here at the bottom between the two keyframes? There's a keyframe right here. There's a keyframe right here. Now if I play it, boom, keyframe 1, keyframe 2. It's going to automatically move the object between those two keyframes. This is very basic technical animation here that I'm showing. But like I mentioned earlier, we don't want to animate on the drawing like I did. We want to animate on the pegs. We can do it this way, but it's highly not advised, because technically when you're doing this on the drawing, it'll also modify the drawing. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to have any keyframes on our drawing. What we're going to do is we're going to, normally it would be only this right here would be default display, but we're going to switch it to display all, and that will enable us to create a peg by clicking on this drawing down here, pressing Control P. Now we have a peg. Now it's yellow. Isn't that cool? We're going to set a keyframe on this peg because it's safe to do so, and we're cool and we're animators. I am also going to go up here, and there's a lot of things to go to. I apologize, it's a little confusing. But we click this object, is translate Shift Z. It might be somewhere else on your software. We might have to, if you don't see it, you got to right click here and enable advanced animation. Make sure there's a check mark next to it, and then you should see all this stuff. But we're just going to click on this. This thing will show up. We got to drag this to wherever we want, really, but I'm going to put it in the center of this ball. Then go back to this tool. Now, whenever we rotate it, it'll rotate from that position that we just set. So we have this set up. Put a keyframe here. I'm going to go back to frame 60. No, actually, we're going to go to frame 31. And actually, I'm going to extend this to frame 62. I'm just going to extend this a bit longer. So now we're at frame 31. We're going to go to frame 62. Set another keyframe. Control K to make sure that's a motion frame, not a still frame. We're going to go to frame 31, and then we're going to move it here. So it'll go back and forth now, right? As you can see, it's going back and forth. Yeah. Isn't that cool, making things move? But this is only the beginning, my friends. So we have our ball moving back and forth. This looks pretty cool, but now we want to apply some animation principles. Principles of animation are rules kind of nature, mostly. That kind of, they're guidelines to how to make objects or people, characters mostly, move in an organic and natural and appealing way. So we have a ball moving back and forth, but it looks kind of mechanical. It's just an object going across the screen, right? Like a machine or like an effect, right? But we want to make it look more realistic. So what do, right? There's a few principles to go over. There's a lot to go over now, and to understand that properly, I have to go into a bit of detail, and I don't want to spend too much time doing that. So we're going to go over just some basic things, right? There's a principle known as timing, which is all about just timing the motion of your objects to make them look realistic and natural and appealing. That's essentially, it's the most important one, but it's like a backbone or a standard for all the other animation principles. There's also pose versus straight ahead principle, which to me doesn't make too much sense. It's not much a principle so much as it's two different techniques. One of them you'll use 95% of the time, while the other you barely use, only in rare moments. Pose to pose is basically what we're doing here, where we set our first pose of where we want our ball to be at the beginning of the animation, and then we go to some other part of the animation. We say, oh, at this point we want it to be here. And then from here we're going to work on the in between the animation, the motion in between, to make it look more natural. And that's called pose to pose technique or animation. The other one, straight ahead, is where if we animated from frame 1, then to frame 2, then to frame 3, then to frame 4, which you would almost never do in today's world. That you only do in special circumstances, like you're making a character do like a backflip or something, and you're like, all right, I'm just going to make it like frame by frame look nice, right? You will probably watch like a reference video or something, but you will barely ever do that. You will mostly do pose to pose because it's a good way to plan out your animation. The other two things, which are a lot more simpler, or they're actually principles that you would follow while you're animating, is easing, also known as slow in or slow out, in which when an object is resting and it begins to move to another spot, it starts slow and then increases over time, and then once it gets to its second pose or resting position, it'll slow into it, right? You won't always do that, but most of the time you will. For now, the fourth thing to say is squash and stretch. When an object is moving fast, this is more of an appealing thing. When an object is moving fast, it'll kind of stretch out, or like when it hits the ground really quick, it'll kind of like squash outwards. Like its anatomy will kind of stretch, right? But that's like a cartoony kind of thing. If you're doing realistic animation, you'd kind of avoid that. And the fifth final thing for now we'll be doing is arcs. It's a lot more appealing to move things in a curvy motion rather than a straight motion. So, and I just yapped on it for a while. I will show you all that right now. All right, so we got our ball. It's moving back and forth. How do we make this look cool, Paul? How do we do it? All right, so actually we are going to, just for my sake and for time's sake, we're going to shorten this. We're going to set it to, 11, from 1 to 11, and then we'll say from 11 to 21. That'll be our whole animation, right? We'll shorten this, very, very short. We'll keep it there for now. So now the ball's going to move much quicker. I'm going to just mark these so I know that those are the important frames. Okay, so now we're going to start applying principles to the motion, right? So what do? We're going to apply squash and stretch and arcs. So we're going to go to the middle of our frame, right? Like, okay, so we can see that we have a frame here, right? This is where it stores the position and all that of the object. But as you can see, as we scroll through the animation, we can view all the other frames and how it's being tweened. Tweened is the computer's auto motion of the object that we set between the frames that we've set. And so we can scroll through it, and we can see this is the frame in between the two keyframes that we've created here on frame 6. We're gonna set keyframe there, so we're gonna tell the program we want it to look like this at this frame, right? But we don't. Before we mentioned, I'm not going to set in a straight line, so we're going to arc it. So I'm going to take this frame I just made, I'm going to move it a bit down. I'm also going to mark that just so I know. So now, actually, we're going to do the same thing here. Actually, we can just copy and paste the frame. Why not? Now, it's going to be going woo, 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 right? We also want to apply, we just applied arcs. Now we want to apply squash and stretch. So I'm just going to stretch it, squash it a bit, scale it like that. So now it has that effect. So we're going to do this, copy and paste it to frame 16 as well. Now if we look at it, it's kind of doing that motion, right? That looks pretty good, but it's still moving at an even rate. It's not easing. So now we're going to apply easing. So we're going to, what do we do to apply easing? So we have like I said, we can scroll through our animation. We're gonna put a keyframe here on the third frame. We're gonna move it right next to this frame. We're just gonna click and drag it. I'm actually gonna do that. What did I put that the second one? So we're actually gonna do that here as well. I'm gonna set a frame here, drag it here. Set a frame here, drag it here. Set a frame here, drag it here. Now let's look at the animation. Ooh, see, it starts slow, goes fast. Starts slow, go fast. Starts slow, go fast. That is called easing. We're applying easing to our animation. We're gonna keep going with it. Actually, I'm gonna make it ease more. So I'm gonna create a frame here, drag it here, create a frame here, drag it here, and just create a frame there. No need to drag. We are working on ones on this animation, which means every single frame, every one frame, there's new motion. Usually you can work on twos, in which you would skip a frame every time, and you just let it, every frame would basically duplicate of the animation, right? And that's like a kind of a more efficient way to animate, because you don't have to adjust every frame, just every 2 frames. But normally you would be looking at just about every frame, or if you're on twos, on every 2 frames. You wouldn't just set key poses like I did earlier and let the computer do the work. That's never good. To make the animation look good, the human needs to look. You need to look at every frame and modify it that way, right? That is a lot of work, I know, especially for a child. So I don't want to overwhelm them. So we will do our best to kind of get that, get them to understand that. But of course, if we don't have time or if it's too hard, you don't have to do every frame. You know, like I said before, or like I showed before. Oh, we haven't looked at this yet, but what I showed you earlier before we looked at this, it looked pretty good. We can stick with that, right? But I'm just going to show you this now. There. See how nice that looks? It's just the ball, but we got it to watch and stretch to arc, and it's kind of going slow from one pose into the other, and going back and forth, and it looks pretty nice. It's also kind of freezing in the first and last frame, so I'm just going to drag this and put it there, so that it'll loop immediately, instead of having like a second where it just stays here, or here. Yeah, that looks pretty nice. I think so. So, there's our ball demonstration. I know there's a bit of technical jargon and a bit of stuttering, a lot of explanation, but we will have time to go through this. We'll keep it very simple. This will essentially be the first exercise for the child. It'll probably be either this or like a bouncing ball. We'll probably do both. We could do an arm exercise also on the first day, because we can do this pretty quick, right? Yeah, that's essentially, this is the basic. This is what we will begin with. From here, we will move into foreshortening, right? How do you, like, you could have an arm and it could go left and right on the screen like this, right? But how do you get it to like go towards the camera, right? That's a bit different. We'll have to do some redrawing in that case. If we're using the essentials version of Toon Boom, if we're using the more advanced, we have some tricks that that'll enable us to deform certain objects. We won't have to redraw them to get them to foreshorten towards the camera or towards the viewer. But if we're using the essentials, which I think we should begin with, because we don't know how much the child will like animation, I don't know how much they'll like the software, and we don't want to spend too much money on a test, you know. And after that, we'll get into some basic rigging, right? We're gonna make multiple layers, say like an arm, leg, and all that stuff. We're gonna make a character, and then we're gonna peg each drawing layer, each component of each layer of the character, and we're gonna connect. Pegs on top of pegs logically to make the character kind of move and be animatable in a way that makes sense. It'll be a digital puppet, essentially. That's the basis for kind of modern animation in this day. But that is a basic outline of what we will be doing in this course. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to email the college. I'm sure they'll forward it to me, and then I'll answer them the best I can. And I'm hoping to see your child over here, and I can teach him some animation. It's going to be great. It's going to be fun. I'm really excited for that. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for your time. Have a great day.